Hey, welcome to Beyond Behind the Bet. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined by Calvin Smith. We are powered by WagerWire. Got a little bit of a later start than anticipated. That is on me having some technical issues, but it is the day that college football fans have really been waiting for, the start of the 12-team college football playoff. Again, joined by Calvin Smith, one of our favorite bettors here at WagerWire. Let's just get right to it. How excited are you about the start of the college football playoffs? 12 teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, tonight gets us kicked off, and I've seen the weather forecast and what it looks like up in South Bend, which I think is going to be kind of a cool start to the playoff. And then I've already let my wife know tomorrow I'm not getting off the couch, so no honey to do list or anything of that sort because we're dialed in to get this round one kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to kind of take in with this. I mean, obviously, four games this round feeds into four games next round, down to two, then down to one game, and then we crown a champion. And no real defined top team. I know Oregon is number one. They're on the number one seed line. They're undefeated, but nobody, in my opinion, is head and shoulders above the rest of the field.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think when you look at the landscape, every team has somewhat of what you would consider a flaw or something that has shown weakness throughout the year. Um, I think it's truly wide open. Obviously, some teams have an easier path than others, and I think that's us being Ohio State fans to no fault but our own. But I think that also allows the opportunity to create a much sweeter story when this thing's all said and done. So I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, living in Knoxville, I've heard a lot of chirping from family members, friends, you name it. So yeah, I've kept some receipts and hopefully can bring those back up tomorrow about 11:30. So
Yeah, I was going to say, did would you have imagined when you placed your bet and
yeah,
let's not forget you picked the Vols to win the College World
yeah,
Series, so it's
yeah.
not like you went like completely bonkers and just said I'm going to cast off what where I live and everything else. But would you have imagined that it would be Ohio State and Tennessee, to keep your whale of a bet alive?
Yeah, I know. Funny how it all shakes out. Obviously, you and I talked, and everyone pretty much thought we were in that 1 or 5 spot. And I think that was, I mean, every single forecast you saw going into the Michigan week, that's where it was. And so there was no question if we were playing Tennessee maybe in round two, but to be here in round one and, that's who we have. And I mean, they're a great football team. I think it's funny how it comes full circle. So obviously, to get this bet kicked off was a diehard Vol fan. And now, you know, hope they send them packing back to Knoxville and look and go ahead and hit the portal and dial into next year. So should be fun.
We will start with the Ohio State Tennessee game for obvious reasons. We will get back to Indiana Notre Dame in a few minutes, but when you look at this Ohio State Tennessee game from your standpoint, now I come at it as a sports writer. I mean, for those of you who are new to the show or new to anything I do, my day job is covering Ohio State. So that's the team I know the best and everything else. And I've really focused on this game. And I come to it from one angle. You may look at it from a different angle. What is it that stands out most to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is, and having played, Division One football, obviously not at the caliber of what the stakes are here, but it's a mental game as well. And Ohio State's had a long, long, long 3.5 weeks where there's been chirping and noise about every which way, as you can imagine, about the program, about the coaching staff, about the future of the program, about the tickets. I mean, the list goes on, the weather, the list goes on and on. And so for me, I'm intrigued to see how they come out from a mental perspective. A lot of times when teams are back or against the wall and they've been told how bad they are for several weeks, it puts that chip on the shoulder. We saw it earlier in the Penn State. We heard a lot of things about the offensive line after that Nebraska letdown per se. Could they match it? And then here we go and run for 160 yards around that number. And so I'm really interested to see from the mental standpoint. Football is a very mental game as well. How they come out. I know there's a ton of veteran leadership on this team, and a lot of these guys came back to win a national championship. I know you know this better than I do, but I saw the class that came in that is now seniors. They've been the highest ranked class to ever come in to Ohio State. And so at this moment, what do they really have to show? I mean, I know they have a lot of regular season wins, but no hardware, no wins over Michigan. And here you have a chance to create a narrative and a story that, would be somewhat of a Cinderella ending. So I'm intrigued to see what that looks like tomorrow.
Settle something for me. Obviously, a lot of talk about the weather. Going to be in the 20s. Could get down to the teens. It just depends on how quickly the temperature bottoms out.
Yep.
Everybody on the other side's like, it gets cold in Knoxville too. Yep. How cold does it get in Knoxville? And more importantly, do you remember in your time in living Knoxville ever having a game at Neyland in this type of cold weather?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as the weather perspective, I think it's got a little bit out of proportion. Like for example, today, I think it's around the same temperature here as it is in Columbus. Looking back at the question in regards to has Neyland ever played in a game that it's going to be as cold? I don't know the answer, obviously, given when the regular season typically ends and when they've never had bowl games or a postseason played in Knoxville. So I'm sure at some point it may have been around the same temperature, but not in the recent future that I can recall. I think the biggest thing for me that I'm curious about is, and I'm not necessarily saying it's a negative thing or it could even have any impact, but Nico, obviously being from Long Beach, California, has never played in a cold environment. And you could say, oh, well, he played Vandy a couple weeks ago. Well, yeah, he did, but it was mid to upper 30s and, not feeling like 17 degrees. And so I was just thinking, I was on a run earlier and it was cold. I was out there and heck, it's 30 degrees and it was cold. And I was just thinking that first time with this type of weather, you hit somebody, you get kind of a little bit of a tingle that doesn't happen in warm weather. And I'm intrigued to see what that looks like. It could have zero impact. But I know Will Howard at Kansas State's played in a couple snow games. Like he's played in some cold weather environments. And so I'm intrigued to see if there's any difference between the two quarterbacks in regard to the weather and if there is, what that looks like.
I can speak from firsthand. I grew up half hour south of Long Beach, California. And if it was 50, it was cold.
Yeah.
If it was 50, I wasn't riding my bike to school. I was making one of my parents drive me to school. So yeah. I certainly know that. And it was 41 degrees at kickoff in the Vanderbilt game, and obviously got colder as the day went on. Ohio State and Michigan, when they played, I think it was about 27. I mean, it was
cold, wasn't
it? It was bad. I did not enjoy my walk from the parking garage to the stadium, and it is a short walk, and normally not a very memorable walk. It's a short walk, but I was like, this sucks. I mean, I was not happy with that. And that brings me, as we're kind of jumping around, and you A, are a disciple of football, B, a former player. That under keeps moving down. The total, I think right now is like 45.5.
Yeah.
I got it at 47. I mean, is this ripe for being a very low scoring game in your opinion?
I think it is, and not so much from the weather perspective. Obviously, I think, in warm weather and arguably a fast track, maybe, scoring tends to happen a little bit more and you kind of feel more loose and just kind of it's easier to get going. But I think it's real more on the fact of both teams this season have started slow and have had sluggish starts. It takes them a while to get going. You mix that with Tennessee's style of play, which traditionally and previous Heupel offenses has been more of a let's sling it around the yard, create matchups, throw the deep ball. Well, they've kind of changed that narrative a bit with who they have at, Dylan Sampson at running back and, want to establish the run. And I'm intrigued to see what that looks like against an elite front seven. Obviously, I know they're probably going to get creative with Caleb Downs, bringing him into the box. And so I think Tennessee wants to create it as a low scoring game as possible. And I think having watched what happened in the Michigan game, Ohio State realizes what they have from a weapon disposal offensively, and the narrative should be, tempo. Let's get our guys in space. We have some of the best athletes in the country, arguably the best running back duo, as well as the best wide receiver trio. Let's get them the ball as many times as possible. And I'm hoping Chip Kelly this past 3 weeks has understood that the implications that can have from a win to a loss perspective.
You mentioned earlier, and I think it's by far one of the most fair statements I've heard in a while, is that Ohio State spent 3.5 weeks hearing how bad they are. I mean, largely largely from their own fans. I mean,
Yeah,
it has not been a festive holiday season in Columbus.
yeah.
Is that grounds for motivation, or at some point do you become what you keep hearing?
It's always and I've just seen this from a betting perspective. You always kind of love to hear that from commentators, analysts, reporters, those type of things, because you're like, hey, they don't watch the film like we watch. But when it comes from your own fan base, I feel like it can somewhat, change the narrative a little bit. You kind of feel like your back's against the wall against who's supposed to be riding with you. And then you and I both know how fans are and how fandom is. They go win the next 2 games. Everybody's telling them they're going to go win the Natty and they're the best team in the country, and they never had a doubt. So I think if it was a younger team, I would have concern of like, are they listening to the inside noise of their own fans about how they're not good? But this team has played in the biggest of games, have obviously lost some of those. And I know you and I were chatting earlier this week. I was thinking back to when we lost at home to Michigan 2 years ago and we're a favorite. And then the following playoff round, go play Georgia and probably play the best game. I know it didn't end the way it wanted to, but probably the best game under Ryan Day's career against a team who's probably a top 5 team in the college football playoff era. So I'm intrigued to see how they come out, and I think it's going to be. I feel good about it, but I guess tomorrow will be all tell all. So
I think one of the things that scares Ohio State fans the most is the matchup of Tennessee's defensive line, led by James Pierce Jr., going
yeah,
against a multiple times rebuilt Ohio State offensive line. I think we might see some changes once again. Luke Montgomery has been seeing more time at guard. Not exactly sure what the configuration is. Will be him and Tegra Shabola. Will be him and Austin Stereveld. There's been talk about rotating. I'm hoping that's a little bit of a red herring. I think that having a unit of 5 guys out there and playing them is much more important than anything. I mean, maybe on a drive or two, you're like, okay, this is what we have here and this is what we have there, and we ride with it. But
yeah,
how scary of a proposition is that? Because I'm going to throw a little factoid out there. A little factoid. Ohio State has recorded more sacks than Tennessee. Now, Tennessee has recorded about 30 more TFLs. And a negative play is a negative play is a negative play. It doesn't always have to be you bringing down the quarterback.
yeah,
But, how scary is that?
yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt Tennessee's defensive line is one of the best in the country. Obviously, at one point James Pierce was the favorite to go number 1 overall in the draft, and that he's fell a little bit. But I think Ohio State has to create a game plan around how can we get our guys on the perimeter of the ball, and whatever that looks like. Obviously, Chip Kelly has had 3.5 weeks to figure out what that game plan is. For 2.5 of it, he's known who we're playing and what they do from a defensive, standpoint. Tim Banks has obviously been creative in the past with blitz packages and all those type of things. So I think from Ohio State's perspective, of course, you want to establish the run, but it can't come back to the narrative of what we saw in the Michigan game where you get that wrapped up in your identity that it has to be done to win the football game, when in reality, you do whatever it takes to win the game. It doesn't matter if you rush for 15 yards or you rush for 200. As long as you finish Columbus tonight with a W and you're moving on to the Rose Bowl, that's the ultimate goal. So I hope that's the mentality and the mindset of the coaching staff and the offensive scheme.
I'm going to put out a comparison. You tell me if you think it's fair or if I'm just oversimplifying things. The Tennessee defense has some similarities in terms of how it is constructed. Maybe not how they go about doing business, but how it's constructed as Penn State's defense.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think, they kind of how they format and what their identity is built on is very similar. Um, I think, and I know we may get into this a little bit further down the road, but there's a couple matchups in the secondary that I think are 1,000% advantage Ohio State. I know you and I texted about one earlier this week, and you may want to dive into that further down the road. But I think you have to understand that, and Ohio State did that to an extent against Penn State. They had several big plays in the passing game, and were able to use some motions and some rocking, between Ibuka and some of the backs, and get them in isolation matchups. And you'll take the guys that they have on the perimeter in the running back room all day, every day when you're able to get those.
You think that Tennessee can slow Ohio State's running game down? And the game was stuck in neutral the last game, and honestly against Indiana to a certain extent, even though they
Yeah.
found the end zone a couple of times.
Yep.
Can they do that with a light box, or are they going to have to commit guys to into the box and run the risk of one-on-one matchups for guys like Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Buka and Carnell Tate?
Yeah, I don't have that answer. I'm intrigued to see what that looks like, because you and I know anytime there's a one-on-one matchup with Jeremiah Smith, I'm not really sure it's much of a true one-on-one. Um, and same with Carnell Tate and Bugo. I mean, we've seen numerous times this year where there's a big emphasis on staying over the top of Jeremiah. They're shadowing Ibuka, and Carnell's one-on-one, and he wins it. I mean, he's been phenomenal down the stretch, and I can't remember a game when he has been a one-on-one where he's been locked down. And so there's just so many guys that they're able to leverage. And another thing that I was talking with a buddy about, when you look back at the Michigan game, Will Howard, after that hit, wasn't very involved to an extent in the run game. And then we rewind that to the Penn State. He ran 8 to 10 times. And so I think if you can get his legs back involved, hopefully he's 100% healthy, good to go. But just create defensive players to make a decision or commit one way or another and put them in uncomfortable situations. I think that can also obviously open up the run game even more, and can create some holes to kind of get things going and create that flow that you're looking for from an offensive perspective.
I think over the last two games, let me back it up a game prior. Against Northwestern out at Wrigley, Jeremiah Smith, after a long gain, got his ankle twisted in a questionable play against the Wildcats. I think he's probably been targeted less than 10 times between the last two games. How many times, if you're Chip Kelly, how many times are you going to say we have to target him this amount of times? I mean, obviously, if the read is not there, I mean, don't force it in. Will Howard has been a little turnover happy, but I mean, how many times are you targeting him?
Yeah, I say every single week, him and Egbuka should each have 10 targets apiece, and I'll stand by that. Heck, I'll throw Carnell Tate for 10 in there as well. I mean, these guys are, every single one of them are first-round receivers, in my opinion. And, we saw it back when, the CJ Stroud days, when he had that wide receiver room, you slung the football around. And I know it's tough when you have elite running backs like we do, but I've yet to see a secondary, and there may be, the only one that I would say could probably match up and play to an extent relatively well is Texas, because I think they have a really good secondary. But across the board, I've yet to see a defense be able to say, hey, we're going to man these guys up and guard them and shut them down. And so at this point, there's been a lot of trial and error. Chip's trying to figure out what's worked. And I know, but at this point, it's you go to your guys that are going to win you the football game. So, I continue to pray. I'll say my prayer before bed tonight that Chip understands that he's been coaching a long time and has had success. So I hope that comes to fruition.
I'm going to bring in a listener question. I had a chance to talk to announcer guy Drew for a while last night on Twitter, as I had insomnia and could not get to sleep. He says, I hate to say that Tennessee is going to come in and beat the Buckeyes. We don't play well against SEC teams. Now, we have heard the narrative about Ohio State against the SEC in bowl games. Ohio State finally broke through in the 11 Sugar Bowl when they beat Arkansas. That game was taken off of the books because of the tattoo gate. But then Ohio State comes and breaks through for reals in 2014 in beating Alabama in the Sugar Bowl en route to its first national championship in a dozen years, the first championship of the CFP era, the 4-team era. With this game not being in Orlando or Tampa or somewhere in the South, and this isn't even necessarily a weather issue. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the trip from Knoxville to Columbus, and we'll talk about the fans in a minute. I mean, it's only 6 hours. I've made the trip many a time, and I don't necessarily hang out in Knoxville, but I have to drive down to Atlanta and, 3 more hours to do that. I mean, is that I mean, this isn't even necessarily being called a bowl game in terms of what the record is. It's called a postseason game.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because announcer guy Drew is not the first person to say this to me.
I've heard it.
Yeah.
I've heard it 100 times this week. I'm not if there's tons of trends that favor both sides. Tennessee's 0-21 in their last 21 matchups on the road against a top 10 team. So, you can throw out all these narratives. I think every year is so vastly different. And yeah, Ohio State has struggled against SEC teams in post play, but a lot of those won a national championship, and you've played against some of the best teams in the last 15 years, and Urban Meyer's Gators, Kirby, Nick Saban. I mean, we're talking about some of the best teams that we've seen, and they've came up short, of course, but I always go back to the narrative that Georgia team. I mean, they're a 47-yard field goal away from winning they 100% win the national championship that year if he makes that field goal, and the whole narrative's totally changed. So, I think trends can matter in some instances, but every team and every identity of every team is so vastly different that I'm not a big trend guy, and I think that's a little bit overlooked per se. But statistically, I guess that's a fair statement.
Mentioned just going into that question, about a 6-hour trip to Columbus. There, Vol Twitter, Vol Navy, everything else. I mean, they're talking about coming in and turning this into Neyland North.
Yeah,
they allegedly got into Apple Maps. They got into Wikipedia. There was, they got the pre-sale code and everything else. What is the feeling on the ground there in the greater Knoxville area? And what do you think? I mean, I'm probably better equipped to answer the second half of this question. What do you think how many Vols fans do you think make it up to Columbus?
Yeah, I think I'm honestly intrigued to see that myself. Obviously, having family members who coached at Tennessee, they're all diehard Tennessee fans. I understand how big Tennessee fandom is and how, some of these people would probably give up their first child for a Tennessee national championship in football. So I have no doubt that they're going to travel really well and they're going to show up and create chaos. I just have a tough time believing Ohio State has an incredible fan base as well, and they travel really well too, that they're just going to come in there and turn it into a 50-50 split in the stadium. I continue to see tweets of that, and they're going to take it over, take the goalpost out, and dump it in the. I have a tough time seeing Ohio State being, in my opinion, the largest dominant program in college football and in athletics. I mean, I saw the statistic. That's a factual statement that they have, from a revenue and an evaluation perspective, they're the number one in all, college sports. So I just have a tough time seeing that be the case, but I have no doubt. I mean, my guess would probably be they have 20 to 25,000 there, which is an incredible showing for a road game. And so I'd be curious. Obviously, you got some boots on the ground there, and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I was going to say 20. I think 20,000 is fair. The great Tim May, retired from the Columbus Dispatch, works for one of the other websites. He did a search of hotels around, the hotels that fans would normally stay at if they were coming into town, and rates were not really any different than what they would be for another December Saturday. So unless the Vols are staying outside of the state of Ohio or something, it does not appear that there is, this bubble that we're not expecting. I mean, again, when I heard that Tennessee's ticket allotment was 3,500 tickets, I'm like, well, that's unrealistic, especially when you bring your band and everything else. And I figured, at that point, I figured 10,000. But then once I know very few things in life. One of them is not to screw around with hashtag Vol Twitter. I do not mess with them. They terrify me. I fell in their bad graces once, and they made my life miserable, and I will never do it again.
I have a lot of. I'll keep it off our podcast here, but I have several takes in regards to that.
we'll wrap up the Ohio State portion here in a second. I mean, obviously, you have a vested interest with a very, very nice wager that would only be a couple of wins away from coming in. I mean, what is your mental state with all of that? How do you feel? I mean, because obviously we said earlier there are of the 12-team field, probably 10 of them, if they caught fire, probably could win the whole damn thing. I mean,
Yeah,
there's not that one really dominant team, but
yeah,
when you have so many teams that, under the right circumstances, if the ball bounces the right way,
yep,
could run away with it.
yep.
I mean, have you are you any closer to selling it?
Yeah, I think at the moment I'm continuing to ride it. I have no hedge pre-game on Tennessee. I've taken nothing. Now in game, if there's a reason where I have to do that and have to protect myself and hedge, I'm absolutely going to do that. But pre-game, I feel very confident in the spot. A lot of times in betting specifically, you can always look at the teams, but the spot means a lot. And I think it comes back to this Ohio State team is such a veteran group that's been put in a corner for 3 weeks, beaten up on and told how bad they are, that I think they come out and show a statement of who they are. And I also think there's been a lot of overlook only off the Michigan game, when in reality, you and I both know that game can swing either way. And a lot of apparent errors on our part not finishing them when we had multiple opportunities, but that game can swing. But not looking at the whole art of the 12 games that Ohio State's played this year, and so some of the convincing wins they've had on the road, the challenge they put up against Oregon, who continues to play really well. So I feel confident going into the game. I had a buddy who he's a diehard ball fan, and he said he woke up nervous, and I was just telling him it's funny. I'm not nervous. I'm just really excited to watch it, and I think it's going to be a good atmosphere and a good show for football. So
Here on behind the bet, we do not give actual betting advice. Anything we say, take it with a grain of salt. I've lost my last 3 bets, so don't listen to anything I say for certain. If somebody's coming in and looking to bet this game, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be, thumbs up, thumbs down to a team. It could be, the total, whatever. What is the play here? I mean, what do you like?
yeah, if you can find an Ohio State -7, I think that's a good play. I mean, you and I both said our score predictions. I don't mind sharing mine one bit. I've changed it a little bit. I'm going to go 27-17 Ohio State. And I'm going to stick with that. So obviously that covers the -7. I think if you can find a live spot, especially if, Ohio State gets the ball first, goes 3 and out, and you can get that number at 4.5 or 4, obviously like that even better. But if you're betting at pregame, that would be my play. I honestly think, though, with how both teams have started, this entire year with slow starts, you could probably get a better live line, in the first quarter, second quarter, early on, whichever side you're kind of feeling is the right side. But I think you could get a better line if you continue to wait a little bit.
As I said earlier in the show, I really like the under. We're starting to get into the danger zone as that number keeps moving down. I think I got it at 47.
Yeah.
I parlayed that with a couple of money lines and other games. So we'll get to that. But Calvin gave his score. I'll give my score. I don't know if I've released it anywhere else. I've got Ohio State winning this 24-13. So obviously well within the under. I agree with the slow start. Ohio State has not been a great starting team, and apparently neither has Tennessee. Ohio State's best quarter really is the second quarter, where it's broken 100 points in its conference games. Because I really take the non-conference games out. I don't really care what Ohio State did against Akron or Marshall or whatever, and certainly with Tennessee.
Marshall won the.
I do know that. But in Tennessee's non-conference with UTEP and NC State was its high water mark, and they won that game like 51-0. I mean, so that one really didn't mean anything to me. But I like the under. I agree. I'm working the game, so I'm not. I can assure you, I have something morally wrong with getting on DraftKings or something like that in the press box. That just feels too dirty for me to do that. So I have to get my bets in before I leave my house. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be the best, just most intriguing spot within the first round. So, um, as a bettor, you don't necessarily love that, but it goes the way we want it to go. I think that creates more excitement.
Announcer Guy Drew jumping in again. The Vols will not take over the stadium. That's a thing, and we'll finish this game on that point. Is it's going to be 106,000 because all the tickets are accounted for, and again, it's not butts and seats; it's tickets sold and everything else. And
Yeah,
let's say you bring 25,000, you're okay. You're at like 23% of capacity. So you
yeah,
sit there and if you were playing, if you're playing at Vanderbilt's high school stadium, that would be a significant number, but
yeah,
it's not going to be a big number. And I think Vols fans playing in Neyland should recognize. I mean, you play in another mausoleum of college football. That 25,000, while
yeah.
impressive, is not the takeover that you may think it is.
For sure. If you were to flip it, I'm just curious here. And Tennessee was hosting, how many fans do you think would come down from Columbus? Or obviously another Ohio State fans, just like Tennessee are everywhere. How many Ohio State fans do you think would be in Neyland Stadium?
Well, there's some there. I'll give my number and then I'll kind of show my work. I think it would probably be about 20,000, and here's why I think it would be about 20. There's still a lot of Ohio State fans that are mad. There's still a lot of Ohio State fans that want to run Chip Kelly and Ryan Day out of town. I think there are a lot of Ohio State fans on the other side that want to save the money to go to the Rose Bowl and then potentially the Cotton Bowl and then potentially Atlanta. I think that with 4 rounds, you have to people are going to have to do some Sophie's choices
Yeah,
about which games they're going to go to. Yeah, there are people who are in great situations of where they could go to all 4 if they want to, but I think that there would be some that would just sit there and really target the going to Knoxville because okay, Tennessee's been on Ohio State's schedule a couple times and never come to fruition. When are you ever going to get to see an Ohio State game there? That would be a real bucket list thing. Whereas fans
sure.
have seen Ohio State play in the Rose Bowl, fans have
Yeah,
seen Ohio State play in these other buildings. But
right.
I think 20. I mean, I think a lot of it too is dictated by what is available.
Yeah,
Ohio State fans do a great job of finding the tickets. I mean, Ohio State has gone out. The game at Wrigley, granted, Northwestern's terrible, was 90-10 Ohio State fans.
yeah,
90% Ohio State fans. Ohio State went out to Cal, scheduled the series when Cal was good. Cal was bad when they played. It was probably 70-30 Ohio State fans at the Cal game, all the way across country.
yeah,
So, if the Vols fans did a really good job of locking things down, like a Penn State conference game, there are Ohio State fans there, but it's not like in a stadium that seats 115,000 or whatever it is. There's not 20,000 there because the inventory isn't there. There's
yeah,
just not the tickets to buy.
yeah.
Fans are like, I'm not selling my ticket either to an Ohio State fan. I'm just not selling the ticket outright.
Right. Yeah, 100% makes sense. Yeah, I was curious. I would probably agree with that number. So, yeah, I'm intrigued, man. I'm looking forward to. Obviously, I'm glad we're at home because I would be a lot more concerned if it was at Neyland and the ruckus of what that place is like, having been there and seen what that's like. So I'm 1,000% glad it's at the shoe.
Well, we'll close the book on that one and let's move to the game that is tonight, 8 p.m. on ESPN. Indiana at Notre Dame. Snow on the ground. I haven't seen any shots since 7 in the morning to see how much snow is on the ground. Obviously, they will have plenty of time for removal off of the field. There may be some flurries in the air, but Notre Dame a pretty sizable favorite in that one. Indiana 11-1. I'm very interested in this game because it's a team that everybody expects to be there in Notre Dame, and Indiana, who's been a bit of a Cinderella.
Yeah, 100%. I think weather plays an impact in this one. Obviously, we've seen snow. I've seen there'll be some snow during the game. Obviously, I know that's obviously changing with the weather, but what Notre Dame's built its identity on with Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love and establishing the run, I think obviously plays to part. And on the flip side, Indiana loves to throw the football with Rourke, and so not that it's going to vastly change his ability to throw unless it's just absolutely coming down, but I think just that track obviously snow to be a little bit more kind of gritty and just smash mouth, I guess would be the word I was looking for. But I really like Notre Dame in the spot, and I think Notre Dame has a path. I know a lot of people aren't high on them solely because of the schedule, the Northern Illinois loss. But I think what Marcus Freeman has done and what this team is capable of doing, they have a serious shot at making, a couple round run here and potentially, who knows what it comes to. I think that side of the bracket's a lot weaker. So potentially, make a run to the national championship.
During our Ohio State talk, we talked a little bit about hearing the noise and everything else, and how do you process it? Indiana certainly has heard the noise with a lot of people saying that the Hoosiers probably shouldn't have been in the field based on its schedule and everything else. I mean, is that something that Kurt Signetti is going to be able to really use to motivate his team? And again, if you can't get motivated for a game of this magnitude, you get the hell out of the sport. But there's something to be said about maybe a little extra, having a little extra ammo.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's obviously done a great job motivating his team, and they probably been told the entire year they're not as good as their record shows. They haven't played anybody they don't deserve in, and they've continued to go out and beat who they've had put in front of them. So, I think he's a phenomenal coach. He's very schematic and is going to do a really good job. The difference of them and an Ohio State for me is, and we saw, is the sheer talent difference across the board. I think Indiana has some great skill guys, but they're not 5-star and high 4-star galore. And so, I know obviously Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame have done a great job recruiting too. And so I'm intrigued to see how they come out. I'm sure they've used that as motivation, but I think Marcus Freeman's a really good motivator and a player's coach. And so I think, he's probably found some areas to get his guys fired up. And I mean, I think it's an in-state college football playoff matchup is going to be pretty cool to see. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm going to make what may be a controversial statement. So I'm going to preface it by saying that I think Curtis Rourke had a better year than Riley Leonard. I think that Curtis Rourke, if you're sitting there and you're doing a tail of the tape, I'm going to give the edge at quarterbacking to Indiana. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree with that 100%.
Because I mean, I really like what I saw out of him at Ohio and before he transferred. And the thing is that people forget that he does have the ability for the Q run. I mean, he did a lot more of that at OU than he, again, I mean, here I'm talking about Ohio University. I know this is a national show, so people think I'm talking about Oklahoma. No, at Ohio University. And again, you have to empty the bucket. I mean, in this game, you cannot sit there and be playing for the next one, because you lose and it's a long winter.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think he's been phenomenal. A lot of people had him in that 7 to 8 Heisman ranking, and he put up statistics that vouch for that. I do think Riley Leonard is a gamer, and he's played in big games. When he was at Duke, I mean, they played in some relatively big games, and he went down to A&M to open the year and played in front of that stadium and Kyle Field, and how big and of an environment that is. And obviously they left with the win. So I just really like his physicality. I don't think he's an elite passer by any means, but I think him combined with Jeremiah Love and what they try and do from running the football is able to create some problems. So I think that the quarterback matchup in this one's going to be fun to watch.
Which of these following statements, and it's only two, this isn't a test or anything like that, is more true? Notre Dame wins this game because of its running game. Notre Dame wins this game because of its defense.
I think Notre Dame wins this game because of its running game. I think as the game continues to go on, you continue to get pounded by, top 5 running back in the country, Riley Leonard's legs. They do have guys on the outside that can create plays. Obviously, that's not what they want to do, but they're built on, let's just grind you down and wear you out. And I think early on, Indiana has a good front. I mean, didn't they lead the Big Ten in sacks, or maybe the country? I mean, I know it was up there at one point, or they had a leader. And so I think they're able to keep their own, but then depth, and you got the home crowd behind you. You break a couple and you start wearing and tearing. I think late third quarter, early fourth is when they can kind of create that separation and essentially break away a little bit.
I'll give my pick on this game. I don't have a numerical score. I'll go first because I had Calvin go first on Ohio State. I really think this is going to be a close game. I really do. I do not have anything on this game, so take what I'm saying for with a grain of salt. But I think Notre Dame wins, but doesn't cover. I think that Indiana keeps close. I think
Yeah.
that Indiana is going to come in motivated. I think there are going to be a lot of Hoosier fans. There's not really been a lot to be excited about when it comes to Indiana football.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously in 2020, them and Ohio State, and they had to change the rule for Ohio State to get to the Big Ten championship game. There
Yeah.
really hasn't been a lot to be excited about for Indiana basketball, for
Yeah.
that matter. So
Yeah,
those
basketball, baseball is actually again, I don't know if you follow college baseball. I'm a big college baseball fan. They've actually been relatively good in college baseball. I think maybe last year or the year before they won the Big Ten in baseball. And they got some top draft picks, which I don't know if you follow the sport. As I thoroughly enjoy college baseball, but yeah, they haven't had much to be excited about. So I'd be curious to see. Obviously, I think it's a 2-hour drive from Bloomington up to South Bend. So what the split looks like. How many does it hold at Notre Dame? I mean, I know it's not massive,
It's
massive.
not massive. I want to say it's in the 60s. I mean,
That's
I
what
was
I was
I
gonna
was
ask.
just there last year,
Yeah,
and or
week
something
two.
like in the last within the last couple of years, and it's it it is a bucket list place to go. I mean, being able to hear that fight song, and I'm no Notre Dame supporter by any stretch of the
Yeah, yeah,
imagination, but
right.
it was magical. We went to the linebacker lounge, had a beer, had
Oh no.
some bar food. I mean, it is a trip I highly recommend. South Bend is going to be buzzing. I mean, it's all the way in the northern part of the state. There's no great way to get from Bloomington to South Bend, to my knowledge.
Okay. Yeah.
They're in the process of still for like the last 20 years extending Interstate 69. It's finally almost built around Bloomington, but nothing up there around South Bend. You get up around the turnpike, but yeah, I think that Indiana just hangs around and hangs around and hangs around, and it's going to come down to a big defensive stop. I think that Indiana will have the ball late with the
Yeah.
opportunity to take a lead, and Notre Dame will get one of these heroic stops that will keep Notre Dame ranked for the next 20 years because of this stop that we will see
Right. Yeah. That's
in,
simply how
in,
it goes, huh?
in one shining moment of college football in perpetuity.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, that they love them some Notre Dame and its historic program. So yeah, I think there couldn't be a better opening, start, with the only game being on Friday night than this one. So I'm stoked. I'm stoked for all four, honestly, but I think this will be a good start to it.
All right, let's jump to Saturday. Penn State and SMU at Happy Valley. It's going to be cold there too. Shocking. All three of these games is going to be cold, but they're in central Pennsylvania, nowhere to stay around there. So I'll be very curious to see how many SMU fans travel. Drew Allar, Penn State's quarterback, coming off of quite possibly his best collegiate game
Yeah.
in the Big Ten championship game against Oregon. You have the running backs with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And then, of course, the defense we talked about earlier, maybe some similarities with Tennessee. Abdul Carter is really the linchpin there. SMU kind of maybe the interloper in this whole situation. If people feel that Indiana shouldn't have been the field, people really feel that SMU shouldn't be in the field. Uh, is SMU playing with house money? I mean, I guess to use a gambling term at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, who would have thought that they would be in this spot? I mean, I know Indiana can say the same thing, but especially SMU's first year in the ACC and what they were able to do. Rhett Lashley's done a great job. Um, I think it's going to be an exciting one to watch. Sorry, I was just reading. Um,
Yeah, Penn State
yeah,
will beat SMU, cover the 8.5 unless PSU fumbles over themselves,
yeah,
which is
I agree.
entirely possible. Big game James is big game James.
That's true. And you got to think at some point, does he come home? I think, you know, and it kind of hurts obviously with what we have with Ohio State, but Penn State, in my opinion, has the easiest path to get to the semifinals out of everybody. Obviously, given SMU and then Boise if they win this one. So I'm intrigued to see how they come out. I think offensively, I was thoroughly surprised at how good they looked in the Big Ten championship against Oregon. Obviously, Oregon, has had issues with the run game. But what Drew Aller was able to do, throwing the football, he used his legs in several big runs. And Andy Kolonicki, I don't know if I pronounced that to a
It's
T.
close enough. Formerly of Kansas, yes.
Yeah, yeah. He's a mastermind from an offensive, perspective, and historically they haven't had the weapons on the outside to take advantage of that. But I thought they did a great job against Oregon, and if their defense could have bowed up, or the pick six gets taken away, who knows how that game ends? And so I think they looked pretty scary from an offensive perspective, which is weird saying that about a Penn State team. And on the flip side, I think SMU and Kevin Jennings are great, but I'm intrigued to see how they match up with the physicality, because realistically the ACC was down across the board, and especially on the defensive side of the football. I mean, if you want to say Miami had a good defense, then I just question, did you watch the game? So I think Penn State's able to use their physicality and obviously their home crowd of 111,000 to take full advantage. And I think they win relatively convincingly. If you were to say put a score on it, I would probably say 31-14, 31-17, somewhere in that range. I think they cover the 8.5 and they win the football game.
Yeah, I have this game in my little parlay again. I think I put like $7.50 on my little parlay. I mean, I may be able to go to Sizzler if I win on this one. I have Penn State money line because I don't trust James Franklin. But an interesting caveat on this game before we move to the last one: both teams lost their backup quarterbacks to the transfer portal, and again, nobody wants to speak injuries into existence, into the ether, or anything like that, but it just goes to show how stupid the NC2A calendar is right now when both of these playoff teams lose their number 2 quarterbacks to the portal because they want to be able their path is, as I hit my mic, their path is blocked to become the starter where they're at. So they have to, they're looking for opportunity, but they're having to leave their team at the, biggest moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a total mishap by the NCAA, and hopefully they address this moving forward after this year. But, it puts those kids in a tough situation because the portal doesn't allow them to finish it out with their team and then hit it. So, they're having to make a business decision and giving what NIL money is paying right now, and they want to be at their new school for spring practice. I can't say I blame them, even though, a lot of people say, well, you don't leave your team. I totally understand that perspective, but if we're here to blame anybody, let's blame the NCAA for not truly allowing student athletes to do what's best for both their team and themselves, and having to pick, one or the other per se. So, I know Penn State has throughout the year used I forgot his last name.
Perdula.
Perdula as an avid runner in some of the Wildcat packages and running the football. So, Aller's legs look good against Oregon, but that does take away a little bit from what they've done this year. And like you said, the risk of injury, and you're one play down from throwing in your third string quarterback in the biggest game of the year. So it'll be intriguing to see how that shakes out.
We'll jump to the last game as we got really long-winded on the Ohio State game, but sorry, that's what I know. Texas and Clemson. And that game will be in Austin, and it will be a damn heat wave compared to the other 3 games.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Texas is amongst the top teams in terms of where the odds are to win the whole darn thing, and then Clemson kind of sneaks in the side door, winning the ACC over the aforementioned SMU Mustangs, and odds makers don't really give little old Clemson, if you want to be a Dabo Swinney disciple, much of a chance.
Yeah, this one I'm intrigued to watch. I have a weird, and it could just be my Ohio State optimism, pending we handle business the first 2 rounds, and I would love to see an Arizona State or a Clemson versus Texas. That could be part of it, but Cade Klubnik coming back home to Austin, where he's from, and Dabo's had a niche for, and again, he has had different teams than he's got this year, but in the biggest games, he's found ways to win the game. And so I'm intrigued to see. I think there's a lot of matchups that favor Texas on both sides of the ball. But you and I both know that that was the same situation in the Michigan-Ohio State game. Like college football, that's what makes college football so great. And so I, I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. I'm optimistic that Clemson can find a way to cover and pull it off. I think that'd be awesome, and would love to see that. But the realistic side of me thinks Texas handles business and moves on to Arizona State.
We talked about quarterback situations in the previous game. Texas has its own quarterback situation. Quinn
Yeah,
Ewers is the starter. Arch Manning's behind him. There, a lot of people that are ready to move on from Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers may not necessarily have the NFL grade that he wants. He may not have a chair anymore in Austin. I mean, that's a lot of noise. And
yeah.
does Ewers come out and overreach to try and shut some people up? I mean, does Sark have a short leash for him if that overreaching turns into a bunch of empty possessions?
Yeah, 100%. I am very interested to see how that side of the thing shakes up. Obviously, when you look as a quarterback at this point, most of the time you've solidified the job and you're the guy that's going to lead them to go win a national championship, or you're going to lose. It's one of those two. And so the consistent noise of, is Arch the better option, but they're in a sticky spot where Quinn's been the guy the entire year for the most part. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Quinn has not looked, what people want him to look like the last couple weeks, and he's, quite frankly, been a turnover machine in some key situations. So I think if Clemson's able to, Maffa's back, rely on him in the run game, use Klubnik's legs, can force a turnover too, and just get it to the fourth quarter, and then put the pressure on them and on Sark's back and Quinn's back, I think it could create for an intriguing matchup. I just am not sure I would put my money on Clemson given the talent disadvantage that they have.
Yeah, this is the third and final leg of my little parlay, Texas money line. Again, it just, there would have been a little bit more to have with the line. I'm not a Clemson believer, but I also have been burned by not believing in Clemson years. I don't see a path for Clemson to win the game, but I do see a path for Clemson to screw up the line, which is like 12.5 or something. It was significant.
Yeah.
So that is my play. Ohio State, Tennessee under, Penn State, or Penn State money line, Texas money line. I think I turned $7.50 into like $30 or something like that.
Lock it in, folks.
Lock it in, exactly. And if and when it misses, just know I can only win betting NASCAR. I don't understand. In NASCAR, it's a long ways away from the Daytona 500, so I've got to hit something.
Roll with it, absolutely.
But I think we've handled the first round here. I think that it looks like, at least in my opinion, we're going to have chalk. That all the upper seeds are going to win in this, and then it's going to create a tremendous round of quarterfinals at the. Let me see if I got this right. The Rose, the Sugar, the
Orange.
The Orange. No, the Orange is a semi. Orange and Cotton are semis.
Oh, okay.
Fiesta. I think I got them. I don't know. It's gonna be a tremendous ride. Remember that you can only find the two Saturday games in the morning and the afternoon shift on TNT or on HBO Max. So don't go to ESPN or ABC and go, where the hell is the game? Those games are being sublet out to TNT, but ESPN will be producing it.
Yeah, hopefully you and I here New Year's Eve or New Year's Day in Pasadena together, hopping on our next one. I am
absolutely do that one. Yeah, do that one in person. Probably, New Year's Eve sounds great. I mean, if I don't need to hear it from people, it's like you're putting the cart before the horse. But if that happens, Ohio State would only have a press conference the morning of New Year's Eve. That's the traditional coach's day before, where it would be Day and Lanning. And if Ohio State loses, then maybe we'll just have a really bad postmortem show. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. I think this is what makes college football so special and unique in its own sense, and excited, to have this opportunity to ride it and us talk through ball. So really appreciate your time again today, Kevin.
And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody out there who's had the chance to watch. I'm starting to lose my voice and have to do another show at 3:00, so I'm gonna wrap this one up right here. It's Friday, December 20th, here on Behind the Bet, powered by WagerWire. Check us out at WagerWire. Download the app at your Google and Apple store. All one word: WagerWire. Sink your bets across multiple books. Line shop. Use our bet value calculator. All the great tools that we have there at WagerWire, and a lot more still to come. But until next time, here at Behind the Bet, I'm Kevin Noon. Thanks and goodbye.